It is my pleasure to welcome you to Business Trends. Today, I am Tolu Ajayi. Yesterday, I brought you the day one of the international conference themed towards a smart city that started Thursday in Lagos. And today, I want you to enjoy the day two, which was Friday, where panelists x-rayed the role of rule of law in the ease of doing business. Panelists at the day two of the international conference themed towards a smart city Friday in Lagos agree that rule of law is the foundation on which the ease of doing business is laid. Speaking under the topic rule of law in the ease of doing business, Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment Okechukwu Enelama reiterated the readiness of the federal government at creating the right environment for investment.
I think is important is that the way government works, rules are very important. So the starting point is to have rules issued from the highest authority. And the Vice President in issuing those rules actually issued them in his capacity right now as the acting president, that presidential orders. And what it means is that, like, under the powers conferred on the president by the Constitution, he has, he's able to issue those orders to the civil service, to the public service. And so far, I think the response has been very positive. The orders have been issued in three areas, as you know, on transparency in government, on sort of the way the finances of government work, particularly for parastatals and statutory agencies and non-statutory agencies of government, and then on local procurement. But the one we're focused on today is on transparency in government, which in itself has three parts to it. One is the transparency itself, the other one is these default approvals, and then of course the third one is on one government, the way government will function as well. Let me say that a lot of work is ongoing in government. Only on Wednesday we met with most of the middle cadre of government, those that are on levels 8 to 14. They were addressed by the acting president, and we made a presentation to them as well. And from next week, we're going to start workshops with them. And the whole idea is to make sure that people understand what this executive order is all about. And we start talking about how you operationalize them. There's no question that it will take a lot of work and a lot of effort, but to get started, the orders have to be in place. So I think it is right to expect that this is a new day. The Vice President and Acting President said it is a new day in government. It's not going to be business as usual. Obviously, we expect to partner with the states to do it, which is why discussions like this are highly appropriate. We expect to partner with the private sector, which is why I'm glad that the panel is made up of leading thinkers and players in the private sector. We expect to partner with academia, which is why I'm happy our professor is a moderator. But it's a collective effort of Nigeria. You know, our vision of government is a government that serves the people. Public service is about service. I was at a session earlier today where they were talking about greatness and how a nation becomes great. And the conclusion we've reached is that a nation becomes great through service. Not by claiming to be great, not by muscling its way, but you actually stoop to conquer. You have to serve the people. And this enabling environment, like the moderator already hinted, is one of the most critical areas to get right. And we can get it right, but it's a collective responsibility.
Andrew Thurban of DFID in his submission raised concerns on the issue of access to finance and the attitude of deposit money banks towards small and medium enterprises.
This issue of access to finance, it's a huge issue for perhaps many of you in this room. Bank lending. The bankers I talk to, they never lend to SMEs. They lend to government, they lend to big corporations, they lend to multinational corporations, but they never lend to SMEs. Why? Is there a problem with the rule of law? How does a bank enforce a debt if the default happens? Can they get their hands on the collateral? How much does it cost them to get their hands on the collateral? How long does it take? So my straw poll of bankers in the room today says 5 years. So if you lend somebody money and you expect to have it back in 2 years, it doesn't come back and it takes you another 5 years to get it back, there's something wrong. Surely that's an issue of the rule of law that we need to perhaps think about. Another issue linked to that, of course, is how do the big companies treat the small companies? If you are a small company and you sell a service or a product to a big company and it doesn't get paid, what recourse do you have? How long does it take the courts to get you your money back? Again, the straw poll says 3 to 4 years, perhaps even 5 years. And how much of that debt have you had to spend in collecting it? So those are the two things I wanted to suggest, that in addition to the doing business, Lagos in particular can look at and should look at to help the SMEs, who are after all the backbone of your economy, access finance and doing business easier. Would be a blessing for all concerned. Thank you.
Chairman of the Lagos State Economic Advisory Council, Bode Augusto, also unveiled the economic direction of the EAC.
Improve the economy of Lagos State, but more importantly, impact the lives of the people of Lagos State. Because if we don't impact people, it's unlikely that we will make any significant progress in the long term. So, when we say it's about people, we look at the breakdown of the population of Lagos State. We see a significant chunk of the population of Lagos State as it is today. Our estimate is 60%, about 60%. They're under 30 years old. And if we take a poll in this room, we probably see that maybe 60% of the people in this room are under 30 years old. So we need to focus on how we can hand over to these people and how we can move the state forward. The Lagos State government has done a lot of good work, so we're not starting from scratch. They call it the Economic Development Plan for 2012 to 2025. And it has 4 pillars. The 4 pillars are economic development, infrastructure development, social development and security in a sustainable environment. Those are the 4 pillars. And we are not reinventing the wheel. Therefore, we have crafted the work we're doing along those lines as well. So we have divided our work into 4 principal areas. One is growing the economy of Lagos State. The second one is infrastructure, which falls in squarely with one of the pillars. And the third one is social services. And the last one is revenue generation. Because we can see very clearly that if we don't have the revenues, there is no way we can deliver on our promises. We have also identified certain things that we call cross-cutting issues, that in all those 4 areas, we must always think of them. One is growing the economy, the second is creating employment, the third is security, the fourth is sustainable environment, the fifth is helping the poor and weak in society to be able to access services. The sixth is growing the tax base. The seventh is we're talking about a smart city. We must use ICT to drive development. And the last one is engaging the people. When we say engaging the people, we're advising the government on policies that will impact lives. So before we go about talking to the governor, we believe that it's important for us to understand the concerns that various stakeholder groups might have with respect to the options that we want to present to the governor. How are we working? What we have done is that we have recognized that the task is huge. We cannot cover everything. We have a 2-year time frame. Therefore, we are going to narrow our focus. We are going to look at a few things, but things that we believe will have a significant impact on the economy of the state and on the people. On the economy, we have identified like 3 or 4 areas that represent the bulk of the economy of Lagos State today. How can we do those things better? We have identified 2 or 3 areas that the governor considers as important areas that will promote growth. The tourism, the entertainment is a part of those. So how can we grow those ones much faster? I was happy when somebody was talking about an 11% growth in a quarter in a time of recession. That is very encouraging. Then on infrastructure, we are focusing on only 3 areas. How can we bring the light rail project for Lagos State to fruition? How can we deliver it to the people of Lagos? Power. How can we deliver more electric power to the people of Lagos? And then our roads. On social services, we're looking at 3 areas again. Education, healthcare, and how can we engage the youth using sports. Then with the area of revenue generation, we're looking at the tax base and the tax compliance to boost tax revenues. We're also looking at using user fees. People who use government services and can afford to pay should pay. And then the last bit on that is fiscal sustainability. That is big grammar. But the bottom line of that is that whatever we are doing, we must be able to sustain it. We must be able to pay for it for a long time to come. For example, if you look at the federal government of Nigeria today, it is in a situation whereby for every 100 naira they earn, they're using 60 naira to pay interest on loan. Is that sustainable? Clearly it's not sustainable. And we don't want our state to move in that direction. So, in each area, what are we doing? The first thing is that we understand what is on ground, because a lot of work has been done, and there we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Then we say, what is the gap? For example, we say in education, what is the gap in terms of the number of schools that we have today and the number of schools we need? The difference is the gap that we need to close. Then what are the strategic options that we have for closing the gap? We're talking about options here because we believe that it's important for us to present options to the governor rather than say just go this way. Option 1, these are the upsides and downsides of the option. Option 2, these are the upsides and downsides of this option. And in doing that, we are focusing on 2 critical areas that we believe always create problems for governments everywhere in the world. The first one is the model, the operating model that you are using to deliver services to the people. I can remember about 10, 12 years ago, my son graduated from university and he asked me a question. He said, Daddy, do you mean that it's only one company that is delivering electricity to the whole of Nigeria? I said, yes. He said, it can't work. He drew a conclusion immediately that that operating model cannot work. So, then the financing structure. How are we going to fund it? Because if we rely and say that we're going to borrow to fund everything, we're going to run out of business ultimately. So we've got to come up with a viable financing model as well. Then engagement of stakeholders, of course, will go hand in hand. And we must have measures. How will this thing impact the lives of people? We must monitor. And of course, since we can't do everything at the same time, we must prioritize and do 1 or 2 things at a time. The task is big. For example, in the area of the education, we estimate that we have about 2.6 million secondary school students in Lagos. If we don't want to overpopulate the classrooms, we need at least 90,000 classrooms. We need at least around about 100,000 secondary schools. 100,000 secondary school teachers. We need about 5,000 secondary schools. But it also means that we will need about 60 billion to pay the salaries and wages of teachers alone. That's 15% of revenues of Lagos. 400 billion. On healthcare, if we want to benchmark ourselves, the UK, they spend about $2,500 per person per year to provide healthcare to their people. Clearly, we can't afford that. Even if we spend 1/5 of that number, $500, it translates to 3 trillion on a population of 20 million. 3 trillion is 7.5 times the revenue of the state. So it's important for us to put things into context. Electric power. Today, we generate about 4,000 megawatts per day. Lagos takes about 1,200. out of that is not enough. We estimate that we have a deficit of about 2,000. So if we say, let's go beyond that 2,000 and take care of our future needs as well. Our strategic ambition be 3,000. It's going to cost us an estimate of about 4.2 billion US dollars, 1.3 trillion naira. Again, 3 times the revenue of the state. So we came to the realization very quickly that the state alone cannot do all of this. It's clear, the state alone cannot do all of this. Our solutions will therefore require partnering with the private sector. It will require employing operating models that are different from the traditional ones that we're used to. We have to do things differently. It will also involve employing financial models that will prioritize the use of our tax revenue, user fees for those who use government services, and then private sector contribution to the development of maybe, for example, the infrastructure. Those 3 items will be priority before we think of using debt. And debt should only be used for things where the economics of the project is strong. So, that is it. The enormity of the task we have brought to your attention. But this is Lagos. We have the can-do spirit and believe that we can do it. Thank you.
Other panelists share their thoughts on the role rule of law plays in the ease of doing business.
Open government. Once government officials respond to the civil populace when they come looking for approvals, once we don't have double taxation, once people are able to do business without hurdles, what you are going to see is a reduction in the obstacles around business, and therefore an increase in our positioning around the ease of doing business index.
Okay, thank you. If we're looking at a smart society, in respect of, for instance, judicial enforcing contracts, then we need to go more than just having a website where we can see where cases are, where we can file our matters. If we file our matters on the website, but we can't pay on the website, then that's a cog in the wheel of process. I will stop for here, but really it's left to us to push the government agencies as to what we want.
Thank you so very much.
Efficient legal system is the only way to do business, because unless you are sure that you can judge the way the other person is going to behave, or you can reasonably guess how the other person will behave, and it will be so, you cannot do business. How the rule of law does that is if the legal system is efficient, and I know that you don't behave right, you will not get away with bad behavior. We have a system in place now, a culture where people behave badly because they know they will get away with it. But even if the police officer who is supposed to enforce the law misbehaves, and he knows that if it's 20 years from now, 30 years from now, the law will catch up with him, everybody will behave better. Nobody wants to go to jail. Nobody wants to be punished, but because they know they get away with it. You will find that people will cheat each other in business. We have a client who at a point in time had an agreement with the school, but once the leadership of the school changed, they refused to honor the contract that they had with them. And they did it because they were a federal government school. And that kind of impunity stops people from wanting to do business. These young people had invested so much in this business, but they were just ruled out and no compensation, nothing. And they had to go through the pain of going to court. Now they had to choose between arbitration or going to court. Whichever way is expensive for them is not part of the contract they wanted to do. And unless we have that situation in which people will honor contracts without too much of expense or reward. As we heard earlier as well, if I give money to you and I cannot recover the property that is pledged as mortgage, it's a problem for all of us. The bank will not give you money again, or will increase the rate so high that it will pay for the debt recovery agents that they will need to engage to get the money from you. So rule of law is definitely the only thing that can make business work.
From the robust discussion and submissions around rule of law in the ease of doing business, It is expected that the key issues affecting the business environment will be tackled, translating to an improvement in Nigeria's ranking in the ease of doing business.